No one's irreplaceable.
Hold on my calls. I'm taping my show. This is Andy, not a hologram. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. So glad to see you once again. And if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. I think that you're going to enjoy this show. If you are like me and grew up on cartoons in the 90s and now a respectable adult in society, then you'll enjoy going back and looking at some of these shows that we watched 20 years ago. And right now we're working through a series talking about Superman, the animated series, the follow-up to Batman, the animated series. If this sounds like something that you might enjoy, go ahead and hop below and hit the subscribe button. You can always unsubscribe later, but while you're down there, hit the thumbs up button so that I know that you like what you see. Today, we're talking about The Ghost in the Machine, which originally aired on September 29th, 1997.
I wonder what new toy Luthor is showing off for the brass today.
When we were talking about villain team-ups and Double Dose, if you haven't got a chance to see that, you can check that out here. A lot of you had mentioned that one of the team-ups that you enjoy seeing is Luthor and Brainiac. And I think it's interesting that we have this episode, which now takes Brainiac and Luthor and builds on their relationship because they put them against each other. And now Luthor, in essence, has to team up with Superman. But we'll talk all about that right after our 60-second Brainiac bomb rundown. I'm going to give you a rundown of the episode in 60 seconds or less before the bomb goes off. Let's see if I can do it. Luthor is unveiling a new weapon that he has built to sell to the government, and Lois and Clark are there reporting on it, but it malfunctions, and then there's missiles that are coming in there that aren't getting stopped, and Superman swoops in and saves the day, luckily. And then Luthor is upset and angry, and he says, oh, who could have caused this and why it happens? And he yells at Mercy that he's going to investigate this on himself, and while he's working late at night, Brainiac comes on and says, oh, if you're wondering what happened, that was me. Come down to the lab and find out what's going on. And he goes down there. Brainiac has infused himself in his computers, but needs his new body back, but he needs Luthor's hands and intelligence to do that. So as he's working on that with Brainiac, then he sets up a holographic message to the rest of the company to say, hey, don't bother me, I'm working on this, and basically holds Luthor kidnapped and captive. Now, Clark Kent goes into Luthor's office to try to investigate, and everybody's saying, no, he's there, he doesn't want to be disturbed, but he busts down the door, and Mercy was even surprised that Luthor wasn't actually in there, and the coffee was cold. So Superman comes back with Mercy. They go, wow, that went by fast. They go in, was that 60 seconds or 30? So they go into the lab and they break in and they find Luthor there and with Brainiac, and Brainiac now has his own body and they're fighting. So Superman fires the magnetic pulse sentry ray thing at Brainiac, but that causes the whole lab to kind of implode, and a big machine falls on Mercy, and Superman and Luthor are getting out, and Mercy calls for Luthor, and Luthor goes, whatever, and he runs out, and Superman saves her and goes, what's the deal? Why do you put up with all this kind of abuse? And she goes, oh, he saved me. And then at the end, excuse me, and then at the end you see Luthor and Superman talking about who should have control of Brainiac, and he goes, well, it's all LexCorp property, so the government can't have it. And then he yells at Mercy one more time, and Superman just shakes his head. That's the episode.
What would you do without me?
Let's hope it never comes to that.
So at the beginning of this episode, when Luthor is presenting his Sentry missile system to the heads of the government to sell them this new weapon, I had to think that this kind of sets Luthor up to be sort of a evil DC version of Tony Stark.
I have successfully privatized world peace.
In the sense of him building weapons for the government. Even just the way that he's presenting these missiles to the government is very Tony Stark-esque, at least the way they present him in the first Iron Man movie.
For your consideration, the Jericho.
Which is all just sort of a setup to get to the real meat of the story, which is building on the relationship between Brainiac and Luthor. And I think that this pairing of the two, a lot of you that had mentioned this in the comments are absolutely correct, that the kind of Lex Brainiac pairing is really pretty interesting because they're very similar to each other. and in the sense of their motives and their drive, and both seeing themselves as doing good for humanity and society, but going about it in a totally not good, more evil sort of way. And they're both really intelligent, and they sort of need each other. Brainiac has knowledge from other worlds, and Lex has a lot of knowledge and know-how in his technical abilities and a lot of connections into the inner workings of Earth. So that seemingly makes them a great pair to work together. But this shows another side of it, where we have Brainiac now needing something from Luthor and isn't partnering with him in any way, but just kidnaps him and says, okay, I'm going to hold you hostage in your own lab until you give me a body.
So we meet again, Lex Luthor.
And I think this story works really well because we've already established kind of a partnership or kind of a work relationship, I guess, between Luthor and Brainiac. So now to see them kind of against each other and Luthor being stuck, and I think the other interesting part about this is seeing Luthor stripped of his power. You know, here he is a multi-billionaire head of this huge corporation and has all these hands in all this type of stuff. But we now strip him down, hold him hostage. Again, very similar to the first Iron Man movie, where he is being held captive to create a thing that he is known for creating, but in a very crude, rudimentary sort of sense, having to do this under pressure and having his life threatened for that. This shows Luthor much like a survivalist, that he is when he's stripped of his basic needs and having to still perform this task, and always looking for the right angle of how he can get out of it.
I'm not some infernal machine, I'm human.
And truly, I think that part of this episode is where it shines, is where it really does well, is that story and that kind of perspective on Luthor. I enjoy the idea of a story where we have a seemingly very powerful villain now going up against another very powerful villain and brings him down a few pegs, is kind of interesting. And in that sense, I think this episode would have done really well without some of the prolonged action sequences. We have a large section where we have Superman versus the Rocket, and then we have Mercy versus the robots, and then Superman and Mercy versus the robot. And it's just, to me, I think it took away from the story. But again, I have to think of, as a kid watching this, that's the stuff that I think you're more interested in, is the action, seeing Superman punch a bunch of stuff. But I do have to say, the moment where the rocket is fired into Superman's apartment, or Clark's apartment, the way he single-handedly, barehand catches the rocket, pretty cool. The other thing that this episode does really well is kind of builds on this story between Luthor and Mercy. Again, when I was younger watching these episodes, I think I missed out on this dynamic. I mean, Mercy is pretty much in every episode that Luthor is in, if not all the episodes that Luthor is in. So she's always there and she's his bodyguard. But I think I glazed over some of the intricacies of their relationship. And I think this episode really builds on and sets up a nice dynamic between him and her, in that he doesn't treat her well. She is very faithful and loyal to him as a boss and owes her life to him in a sense. And he seemingly has no appreciation for her, and to the extent that he was interested in saving himself rather than trying to save her. And that's kind of a neat level. And again, a depth of character that I don't think you see in kids' shows all that much.
Come on, Mercy. Your loyalty could end up getting him killed.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, it is a really neat setup for a story. I think it moves the characters further, and that's something I haven't talked a lot about. I think I mention it a lot, but I haven't really gone into detail, that whenever I'm watching a series or a serial, I really like to see the characters move forward episode to episode. And I think that that's something that sets the Superman and the Batman animated series apart from other cartoons or kids shows, is that they do move the characters forward. You get to see the characters different than you did in the past season or the past episode even. And I think that that's what makes a really nice, well-rounded series. So, great story. I could have done without some of the action. Those elements felt kind of forced in there, and I don't think we needed to see it just turn into a punching match between Brainiac and Superman for this story to survive. I think there was enough other elements. And I don't want to say that's a bad thing, but it was unnecessary. So for all those reasons, it falls at the number 8 spot of my favorite episodes so far. Falls just below Speed Demons because, again, I like that episode introduces Flash and builds him into the story, into the Superman DC world environment. Seeing Superman and the Flash work together to try to solve this crime, and each of them offering their own perspective and their own skill set to stop the Weather Wizard, was that his name? Is very exciting and interesting in that episode. But I do have this one beating out Identity Crisis because even though as interesting of a character as Bizarro Superman is, that episode doesn't have as much of the story elements that this one does that I enjoy.
Hey Lex, what went wrong? Premature product launch?
So what do you think some of the other similarities between Luthor and Tony Stark are? Or am I completely off my rocker and there's absolutely nothing in common between the two? But I think there might be. Let me know if you have any thoughts on that in the comment section below. And just for kicks, if this is your first time watching a video of mine, just type first time down in the comments so that I know that you're here. If you liked my interpretation of this episode, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. I don't care. And if you want to see more content like this, then just hit subscribe because I have lots of new episodes on their way. And up next, I'll be talking about Father's Day for, not the holiday, the episode. It's Superman Father's Day. Anyway, that's coming up next, so hit subscribe so you don't miss that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.